We do actually have more people on the panel, so my first duty now is to just ask if any of the other three panelists who've previously spoken wanted to chip in and say any comments on the five that you've just heard before I open it out to some wider questions. Ray, let's turn to you first. Any comments?
Yeah, I think each of the presenters had just a fantastic view, and in particular, I want to comment on Yadin David's that really the solution is as close to the patient as possible. So although it's a global solution, it has to be delivered locally to work. We all think about solving these enormous problems, but they're solved in very small puzzle pieces. And so we have to make sure that those puzzle pieces fit together locally, and then regionally, then nationally, then globally. Where I think we really, governments, not to be critical of governments, can't solve this problem because it's a local problem we have, and the solutions in the question of the local marketplace, what are the needs? Now, there are opportunities to consolidate surge equipment to be able to put together locally. But when we rely on the government to solve this problem for us, we end up in just unprepared locally. So I'm not advocating that over a blanket, but it's the brain power of the people on this conference that are listening that can solve these COVID.
Absolutely, Ray. That really good points. I was particularly taken with Rosanna's points towards the end of her little overview there about saying now is the time for clinical engineers. We don't sit and wait. I've often referred to clinical engineering as a Cinderella service, by which I mean, we complain about how unfair it is that nobody talks to us, nobody takes us to the ball, nobody does anything, and we have all the chores to do without any thanks. Well, we've suddenly had this is not a very good analogy, but we've suddenly had our moment in the limelight. We've suddenly been to the ball. People know about clinical engineering now. So now I think it's very much the time to publish, to speak out, to form networks, and to move this forward. So that was, and you were echoing those points very well. I thought, Ray. Do we have any of the other panelists want to come in? I've got one question that's been hanging about on the board for a little while, which I'll turn to now and see if anybody wants to pick up. It comes from Riyadh, who's asking whether we think clinical engineers or clinical engineering as a service should get involved in facility design more than we do now, and would that have a role to play in managing these sorts of crises in the future? Does anybody on our panel want to pick that one up?
And I would like to jump in because what we are seeing is that you cannot have an island called ventilator or a pulse oximeter or a CT without realizing that this island is either floating in the ocean or big continent, all influence one another. We do need to know about the facilities. We do need to have planned together about facility, about oxygen lines, about isolation and patient spaces. So there's no question we need to work together. I don't think that clinical engineers are trained or educated to design facilities or institutions of care, but I do believe that we need to collaborate and work together. So far, that is not being reached. This point of collaboration is still something we are chasing. So we need to bring the architects, to bring the interior designer, and to bring the supply, pressure gas or vacuum and suctioning and AC together and work with clinical engineers on better design of future facilities.
Thank you, Yadin. A perfect answer. I had a final question that I was going to ask to anybody on the panel who cares to jump in. In the not too distant future, let's all hope, the current COVID crisis will recede and we'll go back to something like business as normal. And the question is, do we think we are better prepared now? If there's a future pandemic, COVID Mark II, in a few years' time? What have we learned, and will we be better placed as clinical engineers to respond? Is there anybody brave enough on our panel to pick that one up?
It's a clinical engineering in Peru, but also with a view not just in the region but global. I would say I learned more about how much important it is to be very well prepared, how much solid you are in clinical engineering field. But it is not enough. It is also very needed to be able to write about your work, to discuss in roundtables, to propose even changes in a strategy, whether it's in public organization or a private organization. I mean, I think very much on the last slide from Libby. In his tool, he talked about this prospective tool, and the first one was policies. Clinical engineers have all to do to contribute, to change, to propose, to design policies based in health technology. And this is something to be developed in the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that point. And that you've stressed twice, at least, perhaps more, the need to publish. And I feel obliged at this point to point out that there is a really useful journal, the Global Clinical Engineering Journal, specifically designed to cater for clinical engineers all over the world to publish. Get your processes organized, get your ideas together, publish and debate. And that way we will learn from collective experience of all of us and from the wisdom of us today. I think I've got one eye on the time. We're kind of running out. So I'm just going to say, finally, my thanks to all the presenters here. I've been in clinical engineering for 37 years now, and I never cease to be amazed at the dedication and the motivation and the hard work and the sheer brilliance of our profession. And today has been a classic example of that. I'm going to hand back to Shauna now for any final thoughts and words. Shauna.
Thanks a lot, Dan. And thank you to all of our panelists and our speakers today. I'm just very inspired every time I get to hear stories of how people are tackling these challenges in their respective systems. As we've said early on and then throughout the course of this webinar, this really is a very important time for our profession globally, and we've risen to the challenge in lots of ways. And we also now, as hopefully and optimistically things start to improve around the world, have to really think about how we apply what we've learned as a profession, the system improvements we've made, the lessons learned from things that we've tried that didn't go well, to our work in general in a COVID and a post-COVID world. I'd like to invite you to join us again tomorrow to continue the conversation with the second half of this webinar series on a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, training, recruitment, and staffing for our profession in different locations around the world, as well as the regulatory impacts of what we do and the regulatory impact on our actual work. Yeah, thank you again so much. I'd like to thank Tom and Callie Roy for, as ever, keeping us going. And again, just every speaker and panelist and my co-moderator, Dan, thank you for all of the learning. Let's continue to share and learn from each other. And in the wise words of Yadin, together we can make it better. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yay.
Bravo. Thank you all.
Hello. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.